the most memorable moments of parenting come when you're feeding your baby. Whether it's bonding with your newborn or trying new foods for the first time. I can still remember my 3-year-old trying ice cream for the first time, and he looked at me, his face lit up, and he was like, "Where has this been all of my life?" We're never going to forget that. And each feeding milestone comes with unforgettable moments, but it can also come with confusion and uncertainty. From learning how to breastfeed or formula or combo feeding to transitioning to solids. Allergies. So much to consider here. I'm Lynn Smith, and this is the third part of a 3-part series focused entirely on formula and feeding on StrollerCoaster, created by Munchkin. Before we dive in, I want to give a heartfelt thank you to Target for their sponsorship of these special episodes. It's an important topic, and Target is here to help us get the real information out to you. Now, let's get to it. Our first guest is an expert on every stage of feeding. A double board-certified pediatrician, Dr. Zachary Rubin gives us the clear, practical advice we're looking for regarding nutrition. Plus, he's a specialist in allergies and immunology, an important component when it comes to feeding. Peanuts, eggs, right? And then we have a special guest, 4-time Grammy winner, singer-songwriter, and producer, Shane McAnally. He's worked with artists like Casey Musgraves, Chris Stapleton, the band Perry, and so many more. He has twins and a 5-month-old, and he's going to share some fun stories about being a father in the middle of a busy music career. Now let's get to the show. Dr. Rubin, I'm excited that you're here because we're talking about feeding our kids in those first 1,000 days of their lives. And obviously, this is the most essential window when it comes to nutrition. Newborns to 4 months. What do we need to know when it comes to how to get them the nutrition that they need?
Absolutely, and I'm so happy to be here because this is such an important topic. So during the first few months of life, we're really trying to get calories in. And so whether that is breast milk or formula, whatever we're able to supply for babies is really all that matters most. So oftentimes you may hear the phrase fed is best, whether it's breast milk or formula, they are both amazing ways to provide nutrition for young babies.
How do they differ, though? What exactly is formula versus breast milk? Because I know I stressed a lot about this when I was really just bent on breastfeeding and it wasn't working out. I needed to bring in formula and I just didn't understand the difference between the two. And I wanted to make sure that my child was getting that nutrition.
Absolutely. So we know that breast milk is a dynamic fluid that has antibodies and enzymes, and that is what we think of as the natural way. And that's a big buzzword that people think about. But formula is carefully engineered to make sure that it is mimicking breast milk from the standpoint of the macronutrients and supporting growth. And so when people talk about the differences, some people will say, oh, it's fake. And the reality is that this is one of the most studied foods that we have available that has been carefully tested to make sure that this is supporting the growth and development of babies. So it is perfectly acceptable for people to use either breast milk or formula.
My son oftentimes would have this projectile spit up. And I think that we worried, was it the formula? Was it just his growing and confusion and whether or not he needed a different type of formula? So what is the difference when you're just spitting up versus formula intolerance altogether?
There's a little bit of nuance to this because oftentimes we wonder if a baby is spitting up a lot, is that normal or not? And most babies are considered happy spitters because they may...
I've never heard that, happy spitters.
Yeah.
I like that.
So
okay.
I remember with my child how she would just look at me after getting burped and just smile and then just have a bunch of formula coming out of her mouth. And it wasn't projectile, but it was just all over me.
Yeah, we all have those stains on our shirts.
Exactly, or on the couch or recliner, you know. The reality is that most babies have an immature esophagus. It's not able to close off the formula or the breast milk. And sometimes we may feed a little bit too much, or we weren't able to get all those air bubbles out when we're burping the baby. So they spit up. And that doesn't generally impact their growth and development. But what we get concerned about is if the baby is not only spitting up or having some projectile spit ups, it's really about the distress. Are they really upset when this is happening? Do they look like they're guarding their stomach? do we look at their stool and see that there's maybe blood or mucus there? And also tracking their growth, right? If they're not on the growth curve and they're falling off, then we have to wonder, okay, could this be an intolerance, an allergy, or in rare situations, could there be some underlying inflammation that's going on from the immune system? So most of the time, it's not something to worry about, but in those situations where the baby looks unwell or has some other signs or symptoms, that's when we start getting concerned.
Those crucial first 4 months, what's happening in our child's bodies, in their brain?
Right. So the first few months of life is about rapid growth, both the brain and the body, and also starting to get some gut maturity. And the immune system is just starting to develop. And so feeding is really important. That's focused on high calories to really promote growth and development. Then as we get to about 4 to 6 or 7 months of age, this is where we start talking about introducing some of these foods. But you have to discuss with your doctor to make sure that it's safe to do that. We usually are looking for babies who have good head control. They're starting to show some interest in food. They're not tonguing the food out, and they really are able to have good control of oral motor function at that point. And they're generally able to sit with support in a baby chair.
So you've taken us into stage 2, right? Those 4 to 7 months where we're starting to introduce purees. You make a really important point. My doctor pointed this out. You have to make sure that they have good head mobility so that they can actually have those swallow techniques that are obviously important for those reasons of purees. Like how pureed and how do we monitor if they have a reaction to them?
Right. So we want to make sure that these foods that we're pureeing down are easily digestible. You don't want things that you have to chew a lot because it could be a choking hazard. So we have to be very careful about that. In addition, just as a side note, we never recommend honey below the age of 12 months because of risk of botulinum toxin that can be potentially life-threatening. So I just want to put that out there.
So let's move to the next stage. We're in the 6 to 9 month stage. Are we still thinking about breast milk and formula?
Absolutely. It's still the number one source of the calories that babies are getting, but now we're starting to get a full palate that we're trying to build up and more variety of different things that they have tried. So you could try to add some spice, add some savory foods, add some herbs to the food so it's not all just plain.
Could you give some examples of foods that they should be eating? So a lot of my friends did baby-led weaning where they're giving them like a big thing of broccoli and they're just kind of gnawing on it. That gave me way too much anxiety. Like all I could think about were the choking hazards of that. But a lot of people do this and have great success.
Yeah, so it really depends on what kind of food we're offering them in that type of feeding. So we never recommend giving nuts or whole grapes or hot dogs as an example. Those are all choking hazards. But if it's something that is so big that they're just gnawing at it, that's more about having fun with food and developing a positive relationship with food by doing that type of practice.
So let's go to this next stage. When you start introducing foods that they can chew on, how do you know they're ready to get something that has a lot thicker of a texture?
At this stage, they're really getting better fine motor coordination, both in their hands and also their oral motor function. So this is when you can start to introduce things that are more like finger foods that they can grab and start to chew and potentially swallow, especially as you may have some babies already getting teeth, which makes this a little bit easier. So you can worry less about pureeing starting around this time. It may be a little bit later, a little bit earlier. Everybody's a little bit different, but around this time.
Is this like 9 or 10 months?
Roughly. It could be a little bit later, It could be a little bit earlier, just depends on the baby. But this is when we start to give them more finger food, and they should be able to tolerate it. But still, the primary mode of nutrition, that source is still going to be breast milk or formula.
What about what's going on developmentally at this stage? Because again, nutrition is so key for brain development, for growth.
One of the most exciting aspects at this point is the fact that they're just learning how to explore more independently. So it's not you having to spoon feed everything and just hope that they're going to take it down and that you hope that they're interested. But you put some interesting things in front of them and just watch their eyes. That's so much fun. As they start to look at this and say,
what's that?
whoa. And then they're working on their fine motor skills, grabbing things, and then they're developing more oral motor skills. So the tongue movement is much more intentional to move it around the mouth to try to get it in an area where they can chew it and break it down and swallow. And this happens pretty quickly. So feeding doesn't just become a part of nutrition and immune tolerance, but it's a learning process and a social process. If you make the feeding process fun, they're going to have fun at the dinner table. And so this can be a wonderful experience as their personalities start to shine through.
So in these solid foods, of course, you always hear people saying, well, I introduce very small micro amounts of potential foods that a child could have an allergy to. Tiny bits of egg, little bits of peanut butter. Is that recommended? What is your take on that?
Absolutely. So over the past 10 years or so, our clinical guidelines have changed in terms of when do we introduce these foods that are more allergenic, like peanut, egg, cow's milk, and wheat. Those are some of the most common ones that we see in babies. And initially we thought, we should wait until they're like 2 or 3 years of age, depending on the food. But now we're trying to get these in generally before they turn 1. As much as possible. And it's not just that one-time exposure and you're done. You want to introduce it early, but also continue exposure regularly to train the immune system to tolerate those foods, especially in children who are considered high risk. So if you've got a baby that has severe eczema, they may have already developed an egg allergy or both. If they haven't had peanut butter, that's the time that you have to talk with your pediatrician about potentially getting tested or having a supervised introduction, because they're considered at significantly higher risk of developing a peanut allergy compared to the general population.
We've heard so many stories, and I know you have one in particular related to a peanut allergy. I would imagine seconds count if you have a reaction.
Yeah, so there's a lot of anxiety about food allergies because it's become much more common nowadays compared to 20, 30 years ago. And even before that, many people never heard of it. And now there's about 2 kids per classroom that have food allergies. So people, when they have their babies and they're introducing these foods, they get a little bit worried about introducing them. So I've seen parents online, they post videos where they're at a parking lot near an emergency room and they're feeding peanut butter to their babies there. And I've had patients tell me that they do this, or they ask me if this is okay to do. And as much as there is a higher prevalence of peanut allergies and other food allergies, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to mean that everybody's got to feed it in a car, in a parking lot. I don't think we need to necessarily do that for most situations. I think that ends up creating more anxiety. It ends up making the baby a little bit uncomfortable. It's not their routine. We all are creatures of habit, especially as babies. And if you are introducing foods in one particular part of the house and then you remove them from that situation, they have to do it somewhere else, you're less likely to have a successful experience. I'm not saying you should never do it at a parking lot. I think there's just the normal routine is generally better, but always talk with your doctor if you have concerns.
That's such great advice, because I think that worry, it projects onto our kids. We've talked about that a ton. So let's get to a year-old. I remember this milestone because I could put the formula away and I could introduce milk in the sippy cup. That was really big. Is that common for everyone? And also, we start having our children at our tables with us. Does that track for you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. This is the time where we really want to make this a social experience. You'll notice that babies start to really mimic their parents in how they eat, and their palate is really expanding at this point. And this should be more of a social event and just having fun, being a little bit silly to just decrease any kind of worry around food. So you could take whatever you're eating, cut it into small portions. You can make it a little bit softer. Just make sure you're not adding sugar or too much salt to it as we start to give more complex foods to babies and toddlers at this age, so that they can really safely eat, but also enjoy the same things that you're enjoying as well.
My boys still love to watch the video of them around this age. They were obsessed with beets. like pickled beets randomly, and we would give them toothpicks to pick it up. And that was like a little bit of motor skills. And they would always say, beets, beets. And it was so fun to see how you can interact with your children at that age. But it's important to note, all kids are different. Like, you don't need to hit that milestone at 1, right?
Exactly. Everyone's a little bit different. May take a few months more, maybe a little bit earlier. Every child is different. So when we talk about these months in development, there's a range of what's considered within kind of normal limits. And so if there's an issue where, they're really not feeding themselves and we're getting past 12 to 15 months, talk with your doctor about it.
All right, as we wrap up the episode, Dr. Rubin, what's your biggest piece of advice for new parents that are starting feeding their baby?
Don't sweat the small stuff. It is so easy to get caught up in the individual meals where, this didn't go well and now we're in trouble. But really, a meal here or a week here, it's not a big deal. It's about the pattern, the overall, when you just take a few steps back, bird's eye view, you look at what is going on over time. Are we trending in the right direction? We're just offering them a varied palette, and we're doing the best that we can. And something that my parents have taught me as when I was young is that, you just got to work your best. And when you put out your best, that's all you could ask for. And you let the baby decide what they're going to want and not want. You just want to support them. So don't sweat the small stuff. Don't overthink it. It's going to be okay. They all generally turn out to be fine.
Don't sweat the small stuff, I think, is the biggest piece of parenting advice in general. Dr. Rubin, thank you so much for being with us. This was really insightful.
Thank you so much for having me.
That was just great information from Dr. Zachary Rubin. And a reminder, if you have questions or concerns about feeding your child, seek professional medical advice from your pediatrician or a licensed healthcare provider. I am so happy I get to share some news with you. After more than a decade of working side by side with leading scientists and doctors, Munchkin is introducing something incredibly meaningful, their very own infant formula. Take a look. Shane McAnally is a 4-time Grammy winner, and he's also a great dad to 3 kids. From feeding his kids to singing his 5-month-old to sleep, I'm going to find out how he does it all. Shane, you are a big deal. You have 4 Grammys. You've written 50 #1 hits on the country and pop charts. I mean, you're a legend in music, but also a legend in fatherhood. I understand you're the dad to a 5-month-old. So the big question is, of course, which is harder, Nashville or the 5-month-old?
Oh, wow. That's the music business or a baby. I guess this particular baby, I would say the music business was harder, but I have older kids that weren't as easy. We've had an easy time with this baby. I don't want to jinx it, but he's a calm little dude.
Let's talk about those first few days. What were some of the things that you did to engage that early bonding?
Yeah, well, definitely skin to skin. That sounds so basic, but it is surprising how that is such an animal instinct. What it does to the bonding process is just doing immediate skin on skin. What was so interesting to me is if we did skin to skin, he was always rummaging around for a nipple. And I found that so interesting. I just kept saying, gosh, he never had access to that. He never had exposure to that. The instinct of even physically where to put his mouth was just so strange to me.
It's innate. That's exactly right. It's that human instinct. And you still have that incredible bond through skin to skin, but feeding also. Tell me how you handled those first few months of feeding their baby.
Well, one of the things that we had learned 12 years ago was that feeding was a big part of sleep training. And we had to do that with the twins because we realized we were never going to sleep again because of the routine of it. But we couldn't both stay up all night. Somebody had to sleep. What I relate to feeding so much and to I guess to bottle feeding, because that's how we did it. I'll say but really make the baby eat a full, I think it was 3 ounces in the beginning, and not just snack, because the snacking was what would kill us with sleep, because he wouldn't sleep if he just ate a little.
What would you say is like a really great feeding tip for newborns or in those first few months that you felt like kept your family in the flow? You know, these are stressful months. Everything is just overwhelming. So what's really helped you?
I really do think that the tip, I always tell people this when they ask, like, what would your advice be for a new parent doing this? It really was. And again, I don't know how everybody does this. I don't know how someone who breastfeeds does this. It was finishing the bottle, because we get longer periods of time when they're sleeping. You know, he's 5 months, he's sleeping through the night now. And I know that's because the last bottle, we make sure that he gets all 5 ounces. It almost feels like every ounce is another half hour that we'll get. And so I know that sounds repetitive and simple, but it is something that has really worked for us. And, you know, you have to keep them awake sometimes. I mean, it's like, I'll put my cold hand on his belly and shock him, but he'll go back to eating. And
we used to like tickle the bottom of his foot.
Oh
like,
yeah.
Stay awake, buddy.
I put his foot on my beard. It irritates him. But you know, he just goes back to sucking.
Have you been researching kind of like traveling feeding hacks? Because it's been a while since you've been in that stage.
Yeah. I always joke about, airplanes are so stressful with the baby, because I'm so afraid that the
changing the diaper. That was my biggest. I was like,
oh my God.
But also feeding, because, you know, like if they get sick or if they're fussy, the thing that I always used to do was give my son a bottle when we were landing, because his ears would always get really, you know, he'd need to pop his ears. And if they're sucking on something, like that was the biggest save, is give the baby a bottle on the way down.
We have fed the baby constantly on a plane. I mean, it's just like one bottle. It's just like, please do not be uncomfortable. Please do not get upset. If you're not sleeping, you're eating. So that's been our way, is just having those bottles ready. Because even when he's not hungry, it's almost like you try to trick your baby. If that makes sense, meaning, how about this? And when they're that young, it's not about, you know, a toy. It might be just about distraction. And so that, for us, we just, all bets are off. When we're on a plane, he could have 5 bottles if that's what happened. I mean, that's probably, a doctor might say that's not the best way, but that's sort of how we've done it.
Happy baby, happy life. Shane, what would you say is the number one piece of advice you have specifically for dads out there?
I think about this a lot, because being a dad among 2 dads, growing up in a very traditional environment, small town in Texas, different time, I can't help but have a little bit of that voice that says kids need a mom, that the nurturing that a mother brings cannot be, but a man cannot give that. And I'm not sure that that's wrong. It's, you know, I don't have the same makeup spiritually or chemically, or, you know, to provide exactly what a mom provides. But I think that there's something different that having 2 men involved, which can apply to even just a dad among a mom and a dad. And you just have something different. It's not better. It's not worse. It's not more or less.
And you provide love, which is all a baby needs.
We get something from it. I mean, it's like, it feels like a dopamine
It's
having that
totally the best
baby.
dopamine there is. It's
Yeah.
like engineered into our DNA to have that
is.
connection through that energy.
There is something
Couldn't agree more.
so strong about being needed.
Mhm.
And that baby needs us more than probably anyone will ever need us in our lives. And that is the best human feeling, is to be needed and to have what someone needs. And with a baby, we do.
Final question here, sort of, if your son were a song, how would you write it?
I think it might have been written. I may have already written it. There's a song that actually is called "The Architect" that Casey Musgraves recorded, and we wrote it together with Josh Osborne. And it's about life in general and how we all came to be, and how the mystery of this whole thing really shows up when you have a child. And it doesn't say those words literally, but it's metaphorically, it has hit me that way. It's like the first line is like, even something as small as an apple, is like such a perfect design. And the hook of the song is, "Can I speak to the architect?" And so that
Such
song,
a good line.
Yeah.
Such a good line.
It is, because when you look at a child and you just think, this is just purest, most perfect form. And how did this happen? Can I speak to the architect? So I feel like that song, we actually won a Grammy for that song last year. And it was the timing of it, and then the baby showing up. There's just, that song feels like he had a part of it, even though he wasn't on this earth yet, if that makes sense.
Shane, I've absolutely loved our conversation. And I have to say, I love your songs as well. So let's play out this section of our podcast with a little bit of The Architect.
Thank you.
This life that we make, is it random or fate? Can I speak to the architect?
We have covered a lot when it comes to feeding and nutrition for your kids, but there's so much more. If you've just found StrollerCoaster, we have 4 seasons of great parenting information, so be sure to check it out. Our thanks to Dr. Zachary Rubin for taking us on a feeding journey, and Shane McAnally for sharing his parenting tips and stories. And of course, a special thanks to Target for sponsoring this episode. Please note that the views expressed by the host and guests are their own and do not necessarily represent the views of Target. You can find everything you need for feeding your baby, including Munchkin's new formula, now exclusively at Target and at munchkin.com, of course. Munchkin invites you to help plant 1 million trees a year. Since 2016, Munchkin has planted over 5 million sproutlings in some of the most impoverished countries through their partnership with Trees for the Future. Together, they're on a mission to reduce CO2 in the atmosphere 1 million saplings at a time. And now it's time for your moment of calm. Today, we're walking beneath rows of blossoming cherry trees, soft pink petals gently lining our path as cardinals and robins move through the branches above. Enjoy the simple, natural beauty of the moment. You certainly deserve it.